What up, everybody? Scuffy here, and we're doing ourselves a deck list. Finally coming home to the primarch Rogal Dorn. Talking about Rogal Dorn in the deck list, deck and play. Show it off. Let's see what we got. I've done early. I did a deck list for Sigismund. Showed that off. Having really good fun with Sigismund and the deck list. That continues to kind of slightly maneuver and tweak as I find nuances. I enjoy that deck a lot. I showed off the Pollux deck. That is playing very well, very consistently, very fun. The low health version of Dorn, in a way. But I wanted to do something different. So Sigismund is a little bit more straightforward and aggressive. Pollux is much more focused on the Astartes. And Dorn, I wanted to do something different with Dorn. I didn't want to do structures. I didn't want to do turrets, but I think gradually through the course of time, that's what I've deviated to for different reasons. We'll get into this deck list here in just a second, because it's a work in progress. It's evolved. I'm trying different things. I'm taking a look at other people's Dorn decks and seeing what works for them and what works for me, and really the reasons why. But first, let's take a look at a couple games. I'll take a look at one game, necessarily show you how it worked early on as it's evolved, because I think this deck continues to evolve. And then we'll take a look at what my list is looking like right now and why I've got some of the cards that are in there. Okay, so we've got a game here against Flame Master Maudrum, the Night Lords. This is going to be a rough game. A rough game as in hard, long, vicious. The Night Lords naturally have got, I don't want to say a natural counter, but I think by having terror and by having troops that have terror or cards such as Rule of Fear, the faction has got tools that really work to thwart a lot of the tools that the Imperial Fists use. Right? They've got low attack troops. Like, they can get Bastion 10, Bastion 20, have amazing health troops, but a lot of their attack values are very low. Turrets are attack 1. The frontline structures are attack 2. Even their decently costed, 4 or 5 cost troops might be only attack 4 or 5, and they're susceptible to fear or to flank or first strikes, things that can hit them from afar and kind of whittle them down. So what I started out with here this early on was a structure build. I liked the idea of giving Bastion to the trap, and essentially making it, getting more use out of it. He found a way out of it to deal with it. He had to invest quite a few cards to get rid of it, which is nice. Allows me to throw out perimeter defenses and put on some more targets. The idea of having Malky on the deck is to help you with energy curve, but also to offer you something that might help with your reckoning. But I thought with Bastion will reduce damage when the trap triggers, and then you get a second use out of the trap if that's possible. It's not a bad way to go about it. We've seen that used similar instances in decks like Branthan, Tarsa, even Numian, to some extent. So it's not without use. But we've got a Warlord here who can deal 2 damage. Now he's got the Bloodthirst, so he can deal 4 damage. So my turrets are not going to really stick around unless they're fortified. My troops aren't going to stick around much unless they're fortified. I've got Stalwart Defenders somewhere in the deck, but he's hitting me with the damage. He's making good work of all my troops on board. My reckoning is probably going to be a long way off if it happens at all. So really what I'm looking to work here is to get some fortification on my troops that are out there that exist, and look to put targets out there. This is not going to do me much, but he has to deal with it. That's 3 damage that he's going to have to deal with, or run the risk of me throwing down more turrets that will do something. I'm a little surprised that he decided to go with that with the troop, but I guess because he figured he was out there, that he had a troop out there that I might want to attack, that maybe that was the better way to go about it. So we're pretty evenly matched, and we're going into, the 8-9 energy turn, and this is really where I think the thing with Dorn, unlike Sigismund and unlike Pollux, Dorn is a long game play. Much like Mortarion or Branthen or any of those warlords who rely on building up stuff, working on control, dropping large plays later in the game. That's what Dorn is. Dorn is that. So you have to have patience if you're going to play that way. You have to be ready to deal with it. And if you're not, then, well, then maybe Dorn isn't for you. That's probably the best way I can go about saying that. So I'm going to make use of this while I can. I'm going to make him spend resources to deal with it while I can. See what I can get with Jubok. Jubok is another target that he has to deal with, but I've got threats on the board. And so far, he's just kind of, slowly getting to wherever it is that he needs to go. I know he's got Curse of Chose. He's probably got the Raven in there. I'm expecting a Rule of Fear at any given time to be able to wipe out my entire board if that's possible. And yet somehow, because he's not throwing out troops a whole lot, that's allowing me to keep bodies on the board, and this is slowly taking down this Reckoning. Now, the Silent Death was something that I tried early on because I thought, well, I want to stun my opponent's units and I want to build a board. I've gravitated away from that card with this deck, and we'll take a look at the card that I replaced it with. I've had much more success with it. Silent Death has got a little bit too conditional. That kind of counteracts with the way that the Fists want to play to begin with. So we'll keep it at that. But this game, there's a Stalwart Defender. This game is getting there. It's taking a long time to get there, but it's getting there. Throw that down, and then we bolster this with the Stalwart Defenders. Give myself a little bit of Bastion action. And he's throwing everything he can so he can stay out of lethal. All I need is just a little bit of damage, and that will be good game. Not getting it yet, but we've also got enough health to make it work. Retribution is a fantastic card, by the way, with this deck. Just with the faction as a whole, it's one of my favorite card removal tactics out there. It doesn't do a whole lot, but the way that it can be utilized and the way that it synergizes with the way that the Imperial Fists play, that's what's really nice about it. So he's cleared the whole board here, unfortunately for me. It's not looking good. It's not looking good for Dorn. But Valnyx arrives in system. I'll get some amazing, card drawn, a little bit of fortification. We draw out the informant network, and that is all that we need to deal with it. I did find that stealth is a problem. Stealth duplicitous can be a problem. Stealth more so than others. So the deck evolved. That was an early draft of it. It had some cards in there that I've taken out and some cards that I might put back in. But this is where we're at right now. So I still have a Defender of Terra in the deck. I don't play with 2. I've seen people play with 2. The problem I have with Defender of Terra, as much as it puts in 5 units, and they're decent units, and if you've got Stalwart Defenders on your Warlord when they come out, then they can really buckle down. But you don't gain anything from them that turn. I like Doombringer, and I know it's just 1 troop, but it has a resolution effect, and that's very important. That deal 2 damage to all enemies is better than a Relentless of 3 sentry turrets, dealing 2 damage to random units. Could it be tweaked out to be something else? Could you put in a second Defender of Terra? You could. Could you take Defender of Terra and have 2 Doombringers? You absolutely could do that as well. But I've enjoyed having Doombringer, bringing that out late game. You'll see that in one of the next replays that I'll share. Obviously, with it being a turret build, there's some cards that you've got to have. You've got to have you've got to have Castros. Castros is a troop that puts in a turret. You've got to have fortified outposts, which really makes your turrets powerful. You've got to have 2 perimeter defenses, which puts in play 2 turrets and as a front line. Now, having the 5 energy, you saw me play with that 5 energy Astartes that has the resolution put in play a sentry turret. They're okay, but the way they time with stalwart defenders doesn't really protect them. If anything, it just draws them out as bait. So those can go in and out depending. But very powerful cards that work for Dorn, especially Sergeant Armand, which is just a great Imperial Fist legendary. This is really powerful. Obviously, Stalwart Defenders makes Imperial Fist decks work, except for Sigismund. Sigismund does not need it if you play it a certain way. Verkosh Whirlwind is very good. Justice Gunfrey. The legendaries are just great. Phalanx Warners are very solid bodies, as is Orntov's Barge if you have Stalwart Defenders. Unless you low roll with Winter Soldiers, you can actually get some good value out of Orntov's Barge. If you just even get 1/5 bunkers that gain, Bastion 1 or Bastion 2 the turn that you play it, that's decent because that's going to buy you time and it's going to fuel into your reckoning, and your opponent can't deal with all of them. That's 7 health, units that are on the board. As I said, Malkiel is very nice for the early game, as is Kai'Salain. Both have some weaknesses. Malkiel's vulnerable to flank. Kai'Salain is vulnerable to warlords who have damage dealing abilities. But they also offer options. Kai offers you random tactic options. Malkiel offers you the ramp option, which is very nice for getting these higher cost cards out earlier. Grossbar Squad is nice because it's a front line. It's got the stun feature. And I said I took out the Silent Death, and I put in Void Maneuver. Here, and I had a lot more fun with this. Now, this is 1 random enemy for every troop that you control, and when this card was spoiled, and even early on in the Imperial Fist launch event, it was kind of like, on the fence about it. But in a deck that can typically have 3 to 4 troops on the board in a turn, you're most likely, unless you're playing another opponent who has multiple troops on the board, you're going to be able to stun their entire board for 4 energy. That's really nice. Late game, if you've got 5 units, 4 energy, that's a whole board stun. And that shuts down everything that your opponent has got. Not to mention, still gives you lots of energy to continue to put other cards or play abilities or use your ability to play Bastion. Now, Drill Sight, I've only got 1 in this particular deck, but I have found in all of my Imperial Fist decks, if you have Phalanx and you have a Drilling Sight, you have happier turns. This makes a lot more options for you when you play Phalanx. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to have it just for that play. You can certainly use it with other plays, and then just using Drilling Sight to give something Bastion 2 because you've got your Warlord's ability, or you want a little extra energy to play Stalwart Defenders as well as a troop. You can do that. So there's nothing flashy about this deck. It's a turret deck. I mean, you could make it more so turrets by some means. I think we'll take a look at a couple cards that I could tweak into it that I haven't done so. Because I'm still, like I said, this is still a work in progress. But first, let's take a look at a couple more games, see how the deck has evolved to where it is now, and then we'll take a look at the weaknesses of the deck, as well as maybe cards to consider if you want to try it out. Okay, so this deck here has been tweaked a little bit. I think at this point we now have the Void Maneuver in as opposed to the Silent Death. And we're facing off against Korax, who has got a different style of control, but he's got control just the same. So going long could be useful to us. It depends on how quickly he gets the pieces that he needs to get. Now, what's important to note here, we're not going to see this right away, but we will see this later. Sentenced does not trigger as long as you still have Bastion remaining. So if your opponent plays a sentenced effect on you, and they've got like right now, if they had a Bastion 1, Bastion 3, and they played sentenced 1, and they attacked it, the sentence wouldn't trigger. However, if the Bastion was removed, then it would. So one of the plays I really enjoy here is if you've got a Kestros or you've got Amond out and you've got some other units on the board, just using him to attack once to give everything Bastion 1, get Bastion 1 to multiple turrets. That's so strong. That's so strong, and that's going to keep him alive even more, making my opponent really have to sink resources into attacking him so I can use him to give more Bastion to units. And he's going to go for it. He has no choice. It's worth it for me to get that. Even though his Warlord has got Unstoppable, he's going to be able to whittle back anything my frontline units put down. He's going to be able to chuck at them. So it's not in the best interest of me to, throw down a bunch of 2-drops that he can just snipe. But if I can protect one and make use of it and make him really focus all of his energy on other cards instead of my Warlord, then slowly my strategy is evolving. See, he's spending his time and energy on that card. This is still going to do some work. And now that he's got some stealth down, I want some more work to be done. I wish that would have hit his little guy, but it didn't. That's okay. And he can go into the stealth in the shadows all he wants. I've got enough turrets to randomly ping the possibility of a void maneuver should I need it. I don't think that was the pings that he wanted to see. It's not the pings that you want, it's the pings that you need. And then we can throw down Kestros and then get a maximum Gorhagen if we so choose at some point down the road. Sit back, we've got turrets loaded up, we've got a lot of frontline loaded up. He's going to have to really divest a lot of energy. Otherwise, he's going to continue to get pinged a lot. And while he's not getting rid of my units, this Reckoning continues to go down. He's down on cards. And one of the upsells with getting a board state like this is you can then build your hand back up and have some options. It's not perfect, but it is a pro, I found. And here's just another good example. Doombringer, like the turrets is nice at the start of my turn, but ending my turn with Doombringer and wiping his board, much more helpful. Much more helpful. And you can do it 2 energy earlier than you can with something like Defenders of Terra. Now, the downside to it is obviously it's one unit that can be dealt with in multiple ways, but for this particular game, it worked out. And it's worked out in other games I've used it too. So Doombringer is just a solid card. No reason not to consider it, especially if you're finding yourself looking for a good late game option to shift the momentum. So he's going to go into stealth mode. And that's fine. We've got enough damage on the board here to do whittling things down. We can do 4 damage to him. We can stun him if we want, but I'm just going to go for the Reckoning. Now's the time to do it.
Last line of the Imperium.
And with enough Bastion on other units here, I'm going to be able to hit a stone gauntlet should I need to use it. I don't think I'm going to need to use it though. Yeah, and that's a good game. I think he saw the writing on the wall, as it were, so to speak.
If we fail for an instant, all is lost.
This current iteration, we're looking at an aggressive deck. So we faced off against a lower health Warlord with some more control. We faced off against Korax. How does it work against aggressive Warlords? Angrons, Dars, Warlords that can put out a lot of damage. It's not an easy game, I'll tell you that. They're very fun games. They're furious games. Sometimes they're nail-bitey, but if you use Dorn's ability to protect yourself early on, build up your options if you can, and then just hope that your troops stick and that they run out of resources because they burned them early on trying to deal with whatever it is that you've bastioned up. I'm going to take the time here, even though I won't be bastioning myself this turn. If you can play Stalwart Defenders on 4 energy, do so. It's a very important card for this deck, as well as others. It's not the end all. It's a great Imperial Fist card. I do wish that some of the builds weren't contingent on it. You can't do a turret deck without Stalwart Defenders. I wish that wasn't the case, but that is definitely the case. You cannot do it, so you need to have that. So here I'm anticipating what's probably going to happen. He's probably got no survivors, but I want to bait him into using that card. Get rid of it now, so I've got maybe dual jukebox with the Herrenberg, so my Rhino can survive. And sure enough, he does. And what's unfortunate for me is that the Mark of Chaos that this thing gives it 3 more health, which really irritated me because I was hoping it wouldn't gain health and I could just whirlwind it away. Sadly, that's not going to be the case. So we're going to have to work for this one. We're going to have to deal with it. We're going to have to take some additional pings. And if I can put more pressure on him on my turn, keep that health higher, then I'm looking okay. But it's going to be close because the lethal range for the World Eaters, they can burst out pretty nicely at the end of the game. I was a little surprised by this play because he doesn't have any attacking troops to buff. I guess he's thinking I'll go for that, but I'd much rather get rid of the tank. And while it is not a damaging turn that I want to play, what this is doing is give me options. It's going to give me options. It's also going to draw attention away from my Warlord. So right now I'm at 21 health essentially. He's at 16. It's only a 5 health difference. It's a very close game. That cleave 2, very nice play. Got to respect the Dar. So we were up 5, now we're up 4, right? However, we've got front line, we've got Gorhagen. We can put that down. Hope that we can stick it out a little bit with the Bastion out there. I want to use that void maneuver this game, but I just can't get any of my troops to stay on the board, so that's not going to happen. And I don't think we're going to get to 10 energy to use Defender of Terra. One reason why I like Doombringer. Now he holds off attacking, and this is where his crumbling battleground ends up kicking him in the rear, because that 1 extra health is really what sold it between no survivors and the sweep in advance that I stole from him with the 2 jukebox. That's how jukebox works sometimes.
But why?
And that's how we do it. That's how you deal with an aggressive. Angron games go a little bit faster because has the crumbling battleground. He's hitting you harder. And those games you're going to use your Bastion a lot more. So in terms of cards that you could take if you don't want to do turrets, and I think that's fine. Astartes decks are really good to play. Gerlach. Like I said, you could throw out the Lordon Terminators. You want to have Archimus in if you're doing Astartes for sure. And maybe Dar's Way. But if you want to make turrets more turrety, an early Aximov support is very annoying for your opponent, especially if you're able to fortify them with Dorn's ability or the counterattack, and then the next time you play a structure on your second turn with Kestros, and then your turret becomes a 1/4. That's one way. That's one way to take a look at it. You could obviously play with the Fortification Mastery to get more sentries. I didn't have that in any of my builds. I really didn't go with that. You could also do Sustained Barrage. Now, I tried this out with one of my first drafts, and I just didn't like it as much. I didn't like it. As I said, it's a random damage. It can deal a lot if you have a bunch of structures on the board, but it's not fantastic. I do love the artwork, though. And probably, I mean, if you really want to get into the first wall, okay, but I just don't think that's a viable strategy. It's a front line. It's vulnerable to, Melgator at 7 energy. That's such a huge investment. Very nice in events, but I just don't think that is a standard open play thing that you're going to want to use. Yeah, so if you wanted to make it more structure-y, you could probably put in, like I said, the trap. That's a little memey option, but it's kind of nice. It's kind of a early game stall. And then obviously you've got something like Pyramid of Photep and Mount Pharos. Mount Pharos with the Fortified Outpost, I mean, it's hard to stick, but if it can stick like that and you're able to start generating, reduced cost to starties, that is going to give you just as much option or value as Kai'Zalane early in the game. The downside to it being is both Mount Pharos, susceptible to Melgator, Fortified Outpost is low health, so you want to get that supported. Now the upside to that is you could take terraforming. You could take terraforming from the Mechanicum side if you've got access to that card. Unfortunately, terraforming for me, I'm not a fan of. You can get it first turn, and you're going to get a structure for 1 less cost, not 2 less cost. So you're still not gaining a whole lot. And the downside of it is, if you're loading up your deck with all sorts of structures, then you might not pull the high cost structures that you want, and you might just end up getting the trap for 2 energy as opposed to Mount Pharos or a perimeter of defense for 4. So, now, what they're susceptible to, this deck in general, as I said, Fear, First Strike, they've got low attack, so anything that can take advantage of that and shut them down, that's going to hurt. Massive damage, if they've got low health, if you don't get that Stalwart Defenders for turrets, as I said, that is a key card. It's not necessary in every Imperial Fist deck, but if you want to play turrets, it is absolutely necessary because your turrets will not survive. There are so many tactics and effects in the game that deal widespread damage, especially late game. Just as I have got a Doombringer, so many other players do. There's nothing more annoying. You pay 10 energy to get Defender of Terra. They play 8, play a Doombringer, clear out all your turrets, and maybe throw down something else as well. They still have a Doombringer that you have to deal with. So just keep that in mind. That is probably the number 1 card epic for the faction, number 1 card needed for this deck. You could play a turret deck without perimeter defenses just fine if you've got Kestros and you've got the Lordon Terminators, but you can't play a turret deck if you don't have Stalwart Defenders. So now, as I said, this deck continues to evolve. I'm kind of shifting away from the turret build. Turrets are okay. They're a little less reactive. I want to try more of the Astartes build. Not necessarily a mirror image of what I have for Pollux. I want to try a few different things. Maybe a Sergeant Tylus. Maybe the Lightness Squad. I don't know about that, but I really want to, I want to make use of Archimus as much as I possibly can. The Praetorian of Dorn. So expect to see this deck evolve even further. I'm having fun with Dorn. I have definitely had a lot of fun with Dorn. I cannot complain. I've got 53 games with him. I've got 74 with Sigismund. I've got to get a few more games in with Pollux to make it an even. But I've had a lot of fun with the Imperial Fists, and hopefully it's giving you some different ways to take a look at playing with them. I have made use of almost all of their cards. There's a few that I have not. Preemptive Strike I have not made use of. I have not made use of Resolve of Stone. I tried it out in Sigismund, and I really haven't made use of Captain Alexandro or the Cataphracti or the Agathon Falchion. I don't want to do a triple D, but I might do a triple D just for the memes, and then you can see what the triple D looks like. So that's it. Until next time, guys, keep playing Legions, and we'll talk to you later.